Thank you, Betsy.
I think this might be our first recorded ever session. So I'm going to be reading. It looks a little awkward, but bear with me. Stefan's presence in our minyan intensified along with his illness. He was a husband to Sandy and father of their 3 young kids, all of whom are here tonight, which we're thrilled to see. He was in his late 40s when he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. His prognosis was not great. He had been a member of Dorshei Derekh for several years, but once ill, he came to Dorshei Derekh most every Shabbat, often sharing where he was on this distressing journey. When he had to stop working and his world became smaller, the times he spent with us became increasingly precious. He radiated love, and we all beamed it back at him. Many of our members regularly went to visit with him as he became more frail. Somebody needs to mute. He died on Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in 2005. A few of us organized a program on his second yahrzeit. His dear friend, Professor Seth Kramer, who is with us tonight, spoke on legal issues related to the issues of the day, of which there were many. My memory is hazy about how it was that we decided to repeat this annually, but I recall meeting up with David Mosenkis at High Point to kick around ideas. Stefan had been the legal director of the Pennsylvania ACLU, and many Minyan teens interned for him. Inviting them to speak was a way for us to all process both the loss of Stefan and nurture his legacy. We got to hear what work Ari Spicehandler-Bruchen, Josh Marcus, Francis Kramer, and our son Zachary Teutsch were up to, and they are all active in social justice work careers as adults. By 2010, our planning group included Donald Joseph. In Stefan's memory, we planned an annual program on a specific social justice topic in the late fall or early winter. While the GJC community was always invited, it has primarily been an internal Dorshei Derekh event. Our formula was to choose an issue we wanted to learn more about, invite an expert activist to speak, and pair that person with someone with substantial Jewish insight on the topic. Adding a lunch, or as we called it, lunchy kiddush, encouraged people to stick around. This was our approach for the ensuing decade, pulled off on a shoestring funded by our Minyan treasury. In the aughts, Germantown Jewish Center's social justice portfolio resided in the Social Action Committee. This committee was tasked with the annual Martin Luther King program, done in conjunction with local churches through the neighborhood interfaith movement, which was led by, at those days, by George Stern, Rabbi George Stern. They also planned the annual Granger Shabbat, focusing on local social justice issues. And the committee also worked on direct service, organizing volunteers for tutoring and story times at the Henry and Houston schools. Germantown Jewish Center's role in housing and feeding homeless families, the Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network, began in 1996, a complex undertaking with its own team of in-house volunteers, becoming a major focus of direct service GJC mitzvah activity. What was missing at GJC back then was a way for members with a passion around a particular cause to organize and build support for shared activism. We have always had many members in our synagogue involved in a myriad of issues. In our minyan, Stefan brought his ACLU background. Michael Mash, Zikrono Livracha, was our pipeline to city politics, as well as to Harrisburg and Pennsylvania state government policy and budget. It's not every minyan that offered a Misha Beirach when the state budget passed. Many of our Stefan Presser program topics were proposed by Dorshei Derekh members wanting a platform for causes in which they were already immersed. Malka Bina Klein became our next committee chair, and she brought some specific programs to our attention, including the one on gun violence, Mothers Against Gun Violence, very powerful, and another on returning citizens, integrating returning citizens. On some level, we use this social justice annual program as an incubator. Quite a few of these topics grew into synagogue-wide concerns. In 2016, the Germantown Jewish Centre Social Action Committee was restructured as a Tikkun Olam coordinating team. One of those working to bring about this change is our own Abby Weinberg, who I think is with us tonight. The mission is now very different, supporting members to advocate and organize for the causes they care about and running programs where congregants can get involved. Tikkun Olam means repairing the world. Clearly, we have continued providing direct services, but have expanded to working for systemic change. We will be hearing Donald Joseph's update on the Pennsylvania school funding trial, the culmination of decades of work. David Mosenkis will be talking in a few minutes about the synagogue's deepening commitment to power, P-O-W-E-R. It's an acronym for something I can never remember what, but it's the statewide multi-faith, multiracial movement advocating for systemic change in a number of areas. We will be hearing from Seth Lieberman, who chairs the synagogue-wide refugee committee, and we will be hearing from Tamara Cohen on the Minyan's anti-racism task force, along with hearing about the synagogue's work in that area. These are all topics that we have featured at specific social justice Shabbatot and are now woven into our synagogue's work. Personal activism and community organizing have taken off exponentially. Just a second. Since they have taken off exponentially since the beginning of our Presser Shabbatot in 2008. Something else happened in 2008, a new president. The language around this work has changed. We have moved from social action to social justice to tikkun olam. We are now more nuanced about justice. We speak of racial justice, food justice, environmental and climate justice, reproductive justice, education justice, disability justice, gender justice. Kol Tzedek, the Reconstructionist congregation in West Philly, where many GJC Gen Xers are active, including Josh Marcus, named itself Kol Tzedek, a voice for justice, right there, front and center. There are many similar synagogues around the country that have sprung up with a primary focus on tikkun olam. Obviously, the 4 years of the previous administration raised the pursuit of social justice to a crisis level, and 2 years of pandemic have reset most everything. The Jewish community has generated ever more justice-oriented organizations, so many that keeping track of them is challenging. Tonight, we are reflecting on how social justice and tikkun olam move from the periphery of Dorshei Derekh, something some of our members were devoted to becoming a central focus of our community, and how Dorshei Derekh's commitment to these values connects to GJC, our larger home. We cannot claim that our Stefan Presser social justice programs brought this about, but we, modestly perhaps, do think they have helped to galvanize Dorshei Derekh and motivated many of us to get more involved in initiatives we learned about at these programs. Indeed, we are better together. Pursuing justice is more effective and more satisfying when it's a shared effort. Join me in kvelling and hearing in more detail from Dorshei Derekh members about their justice work. And let me say before we turn it over to Donald Joseph that we're going to have breakout groups with questions after the 4 panels. We are not going to have questions and answers of the speakers, however. So Donald, thank you.
You're muted, Don. Thank you, Betsy. Very well done. What does a trial about public funding for Pennsylvania public schools have to do with the Presser program? Is the trial important to certain of Pennsylvania's public schools, especially Philadelphia's? And what is the status of the trial? Perhaps the most direct connection of the case to GJC is that in 2018, the Presser program considered educating our children a tale of two cities. David Mosenkis and Rabbi Zeph were on that panel. More connections will be seen later. Let's start with the harsh reality. We live in the 45th of the 50 states based on the state's funding percentage of public education. And then the poorer and minority school districts receive less than their share. Isn't it fair to say that the poorer schools in Pennsylvania are funded no better than the average of the least well-funded of any state? Moreover, Pennsylvania funds its schools in a discriminatory way. While the state provides over half of each school's budgets, the rest of the budgets are made up of local contributions. Note, most other states fund with the local contributions, but the state share, as we've just noted, is much higher. In a nutshell, the lawsuit is about that difference in funding. Obviously, the mainly white, wealthier school districts fund their schools at much greater per pupil rates because they can afford to do so. Is it any wonder that Philadelphia funds its schools at less per capita than Lower Merion when its when its per capita median income is 1/4 that of Lower Merion? In 1999, after years of litigation, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court held that school districts and individuals, like the plaintiffs in this case, could not sue the state. And that was contrary to decisions of the highest courts in 6 other states with identical constitutional language. Approximately 5 years ago, 18 years after that original decision, the Supreme Court reversed itself, allowing such lawsuits. The past November, a trial started. 12 weeks later, after full day hearings, 5 days a week, it is finally now time for the state to put on its case. Should the poorer minority-based school districts win, the state would have to put up large amounts of money to equalize the per pupil expenditures. When the Kansas highest court tried to impose a similar result, the legislature refused to allocate the money, and a constitutional crisis developed. Do not be surprised if a similar constitutional crisis happens a few years from now. Mike Churchill, I have to mention as a friend and such a mover in this case, and the Public Interest Law Center began this litigation in the early 90s. And roughly 3 decades later, both Mike and the Public Interest Law Center are still litigating the case, now the second case. 2 of us from the Presser Committee are connected to the Law Center and the case. I was on the board for 30 years, chair or vice chair for 7, and watched the earlier litigation. The more important connection for this lawsuit is David Mosenkis. In July 2016, he produced a report for the Law Center demonstrating that the lower per student expenditure, the higher the percentage of minority students in the district. Let me make that clear. The lower the per student expenditures, the higher the percentage of minority students. Mark, do you have those? Okay, so
Is this the one you want first, Donald?
Yes, yes. And that's David's original. And notice the line that he put through there on a on an angle going up sets the per capita funding if it were equal. On the left of that, meaning more money than usual, than the calculated amount, are, notice, all the white schools, very few black. And on the other side, the lower side, all black. Was there racial discrimination? That's for a court to tell. Next one. So this slide shows it in a little different way, with the colors going with the color of skin. The black school districts, the ones with the most minorities, get the least money. And it goes all the way up to 1900. So you can see the difference between them is probably $4,000 per student. So one class, 30 students, would produce $120,000. You can see how these monies add up. Mark, I'm going to forgo the last one. Oh, there you go. The importance of this case could not be greater for the less well-funded schools, more weighted toward minorities, including Philadelphia. Hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even in the billions, could be the result of this case. It is similarly important to every taxpayer in the state, because the state will probably have to raise taxes to pay this obligation. Beginning next week, the state has the opportunity to justify what I suggest is unjustifiable. And I'm betting David agrees with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Donald, that's very powerful. We're going to hear from David Mosenkis next.
Thanks, Betsy, and thanks, Don.
David, you're muted.
Okay, how about now? Good. Okay, so I said thanks to Don, and thanks to Betsy and the committee who organized tonight's program. And it's an honor to be part of it as not an organizer this year, but as a one of the panelists. The committee asked me to speak about GJC's engagement with Power Interfaith. And so I'll do that really briefly. And just to say that around 7 years ago, when we were thinking, a bunch of us were thinking about how to make changes in how we did social justice work at GJC, and ended up changing into the Tikkun Olam coordinating team. One of the things we knew that we wanted to provide more of an outlet for was acting for systemic change, as distinct from direct service work, both really important components. And one of the things we noted is that it's hard to affect systemic change as a single person or even as a single congregation. And at about the same time, we learned about Power Interfaith as being this citywide initiative to organize congregations across different religions to work for justice issues. And that was very appealing to a lot of us to be able to join together with other communities, but in particular to do it across lines of different religions, and especially across different lines of class and racial makeups across the city. And so we've been doing that now. Power within a couple of years GJC became a member of Power. And the area that Andy Moselle and I, who led the investigation and ultimately GJC's affiliation with Power, got most involved in is Power's education justice team. And the reason we chose that one was really that one of the first things we did under Power's guidance when we were considering joining was conduct a series of one-to-one conversations across the diverse membership of Germantown Jewish Centre. And from 50 of these one-to-one conversations that a small team of us conducted, far and away across all of the different issues that people were concerned with, the number one among GJC members was public school and public education. So we got involved in that, and that's what led to the opportunity for me to apply my data expertise to the injustices in Pennsylvania's school funding that Don talked about. So I want to share with you what else is going on with Power now. First of all, you should know Power has expanded beyond Philadelphia over the last number of years to include the surrounding counties, which are called Power Metro, and then also into central Pennsylvania, based around Lancaster and Lebanon, and it's in Lehigh Valley, based around Allentown and Bethlehem, and is continuing to expand in other parts of the state. And that's because a lot of the issues we're trying to take on and make a difference on, like public school funding, needs to happen at the state level. It can't just happen at the Philadelphia local level. So in the education justice area, in addition to the statewide funding inequities that Power has been working long and hard on, Power has also been engaging at the local level on a number of areas in the Philadelphia school system. And in particular, some of the active areas there are around resources for local schools and also the conditions of school buildings and necessary repairs to toxic school buildings. So Power has been an important player in coalitions and making changes in those areas. Power's other three main active campaigns now are number one, climate justice and jobs. Power is involved again at both the local and the state level there. And the climate justice in general is looking at climate issues through a lens that looks at how climate issues can exacerbate existing inequalities that split down along race and class lines. So at the local level, Power has been working in the climate team on how PGW can transition to a renewable energy system, issues with SEPTA and environmental issues there about a plant in Nicetown, and issues about what to do with the former refinery in South Philadelphia. And then at the state level, they're looking at climate issues and part of tables there around climate equity at the state level. Then Power's one of the other main campaigns is the Live Free or Criminal Justice campaign, where Power has been, the Live Free team has been involved in a number of campaigns, in particular around police accountability, where they have been playing an important role in creating a citizens oversight committee to investigate issues that come up around policing misconduct. Then around ending gun violence, around mass incarceration, and immigration and deportation issues. And then finally, Power's economic dignity team has had a number of successes in getting a living wage set for a certain subset of local jobs, but has been very constrained because of state laws that prevent a municipality anywhere in Pennsylvania from establishing its own minimum wage for the city. So Power is continuing to work on ending that preemption so that cities like Philadelphia or any other city can set a higher minimum wage, as well as increasing the minimum wage at the state level. And then the economic dignity team is also working on creating a public bank and on issues around housing access. And then finally, Power continues to work around voter engagement and making sure that people have the ability and access to vote and to have their votes counted. So if you're interested in getting involved in any of those, you can go to the Power website. You can also get in touch with me or with Andy Moselle. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all that work and sharing it with us, David. I put it in the link in the chat, and Nancy has added something. And next we're going to hear from Seth Lieberman about refugee work.
On behalf of my co-chair, Joyce Lieberman, and the dozens of volunteers from the Refugee Immigrant Justice Group, I want to thank the Presser Committee for inviting us to share some of what we've been up to. Human beings are hardwired to identify with those in group. And where this gets complicated is when we look outside our in group, and we can be vulnerable to expressing apathy and even antipathy. We see this on the middle school playground, and we see this on the world stage. And I believe that our tradition, both our sacred texts, which talk about loving and clothing the stranger because we were strangers in the land of Egypt, as well as our extended family histories of needing to flee and finding a place in this country, the lived experience of our extended families, that our tradition and our experiences present an opportunity to overcome, to manage, to rise above that hard wiring that I think exists all over, and to be honest, in our own community and even inside myself. And this is something we need to train ourselves to surmount. I believe that we have something in our tradition, our lived experience that we owe to bring to the world, and especially to our country, to make right some of the really cruel and inhumane ways that our country has and continues to treat immigrants and refugees. The origin story of the refugee work happened when Beth and I were still living in California, but there were a group of people, mostly Dorshei people, many of whom are on this Zoom call today, who sponsored some Syrian families and formed a set of relationships that I think put it even more in our consciousness that this is not an other, but this could be us. But we really got activated during the previous administration, as Betsy had mentioned. We heard the most abhorrent words coming from the President of the United States, and said publicly, things said publicly that I had thought people would only say privately behind closed doors. And as Jews, we know what happens when there is dehumanizing rhetoric. We know what comes after that. And unfortunately, it wasn't even just the rhetoric, but actions that I consider hate crimes done in our name. And you're familiar with some of the most famous ones, the family separations, the Muslim ban, and the Remain in Mexico program, which embarrassingly continues to this date. Now, many of us got involved here at GJC in response to the first refugee Shabbat that Margaret and Naomi brought to us, and it sort of galvanized. We had dozens of people inside of my home coming together, and there was so much wrong, and we felt so impelled to act. But the question was, which way do we go? And I think you heard Betsy and David talk about some of these decisions. Do we focus on direct support and building connections with individual immigrant and refugee families? Do we get involved in the streets with protests? Do we reach out to elected officials and use whatever privilege we may have to engage and persuade and hold accountable our elected officials to act in ways that are congruent with the values that we say we have? And our group made the decision, which I think was a wise one, which was to pursue all of these dimensions. The belief was that the personal connections and the direct service work would give us a personal stake. This was not, it was not something that was from a distance, but something we know about. And that motivated us to hit the streets with anger. And hitting the streets with anger made us say, well, wait a minute, who do we know? What privilege do we have that we can bring to bear, and in this moment to make policies that are better? The first sort of significant act of GJC's refugee group was we decided to convene at GJC. We organized an event, a training of 16 Jewish congregations from all over the Philadelphia region. We had 60 people there. We brought in Hayas from DC and New York to educate us and to train us on being advocates. And we left that meeting with a commitment which we fulfilled, where we organized Jewish constituents in all 6 of the US congressional districts that are in greater Philadelphia. And we met with the offices of all 6 Congress people. And that work continues to this day. We also got part of our group is we decided we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we found protests that we thought were worth going to. And with many of you on this call, we were at the airport, we were at ICE, we were at our own Betsy Teutsch's Lights for Liberty protest. And then in November, we made a pivot, which again was about this question of how do we work on the individual and the systemic level. And we decided that the issue of the treatment of refugees and immigrants was on the ballot in our national election, and we couldn't pretend otherwise. And so our group, we found this marvelous, really grassrootsy group that did voter turnout, and we logged hundreds and hundreds of hours helping turn out people. The idea being, if we could get turnout in Pennsylvania, then we could have more just policies. So that kind of brings you up to where we are today. I just want to give you a little taste of what is in the next month or two with our group. So this February 8th, we are participating with Highest National's Day of Advocacy. So we are, and you can see this in the GJC emails, but we are asking people to call our Congress people and our senators, and we will be focused on the Afghan Adjustment Act, which basically makes it so that every Afghan doesn't have to prove that they had to flee Afghanistan because it was dangerous, but actually provides a path for permanent residency. We are also, and thanks to the leadership of Debbie Stern and Naomi Clayman, we are getting ready to sponsor an Afghan family, one of the 75,000 people who have reached our country. And so we invite you to get involved with that. We're continuing our advocacy. In the last 6 weeks, we've met with Congressman Evans. We just had a meeting last week with Congresswoman Dean's office, and we're continuing to advocate for the Afghan Adjustment Act, against the Biden administration's abhorrent treatment of Haitians, against the continued use of Title 42, which I could talk about later if people want, and also against the Remain in Mexico program. This March 5th, we will have Refugee Shabbat once again. Here in Dorshei, we'll have a special service and a Devar Torah. On March 6th, we'll have a 1-hour program on Zoom where we will hear from the leader of Afghans of Philadelphia. We'll get some legislative updates, and we'll also have a chance to honor our own Ed Lake, who was a Zichron Livracha, who was a core part of our group. The only other thing that's on our minds is that we have an election coming this November, and we know that we will feel compelled to get involved with that once again. So I just want to say we're a tight group, but being true to the mission of saying, how do we look beyond our in-group? I want to say, if you're interested in joining us, we would love to have you, and we reach out to you. And we think we have a lot of different ways that you can get involved depending on your interest. So feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate today.
Well, thank you for all your work. I'm sorry that this is feeling a little bit like great hits of social justice, but we do have time. We want to hear as much as possible about as many issues. So lastly, we're going to hear from Rabbi Tamara Cohen on a small issue, racial justice.
Thank you. I had a feeling that being the fourth, we would feel a little bit like this at this point. So I just want to first honor the incredible work and also the incredible weight of sitting and taking in everything that we have just heard. Of course, all of it is also about anti-racism. And one of the many books that a lot of us read during this period of time of the anti-racism group was by Risma Menachem, My Grandmother's Hands. And so just to honor that, I invite you, if you're feeling, if you're noticing any kind of tightness or overwhelm in taking all this in, to just pay attention to it. Because this stuff lives in our bodies, not just in our heads, even though we are a heady group. And there's a lot of important heady work to do.
The beach got 18 inches.
Yep.
And the beach got 18 inches. Okay. And so I'm also going to share something that's called an answer garden. I'm going to put a link in the chat. And this is just an opportunity for anybody who wants to do a little participatory thing. There's a question here, and you can answer it. The question is, share an idea or image from Dorshei Derekh's anti-racism work that has impacted you. And when we get farther along, I can share all the different answers. You can answer as many times as you want. So in part, after the 2019 Presser Shabbat, which focused on Jews of color in our community and making ourselves a more inclusive community, a group decided to continue and really work on what does it mean to become an anti-racist minyan. And holding in mind also an anti-racist shul. And every member of that subgroup, and I think the list is Elise and Malkabina and Atenea and Dina Pinsky and George and me and Michael Blackman and Andrea Jacobs and Jen Paget and David Mosenkis and Beth Janice. Sorry, I didn't say everyone's last names. Not everybody still, but everybody participated. And then there were 52 people who signed up for one of our first things, which was 2 different reading groups going through the tough and, in my mind, really helpful book of White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And I think with everything that we have done, there was both a process, an intellectual process of educating ourselves more, of building a shared vocabulary and a shared understanding, of doing a lot of internal reflection, and of getting kind of over being embarrassed with where we are in doing it together. And so for me, a piece of the richness of the work has been also building community through this shared work, the shared vulnerable, deep work. And so there's an interesting TED talk by someone named Jay Small, and he talks about how in America, if someone calls you racist or suggests that you're racist, it's kind of like the worst thing you can be called. And he talks about how we need to work towards a time, not when we won't ever be called on stuff, but when it'll be like someone telling you, you have some spinach in your teeth. Maybe a little bit awkward, But we kind of appreciate it when someone at Kiddush would come up and maybe eventually, hopefully again soon, tell us that. And that's what it's like, because we're all kind of swimming in this. And it's like ongoing hygiene, ongoing dental hygiene. It's not about a process that we're going to finish. It's about a process that we have taken on as a minyan, going through together, opening our eyes more, pokeach ivrim, really being able to see ourselves, to see others, to see our biases, and to understand the history of our country, the complicated history of Jews, and especially Ashkenazi Jews in this country. And so after the two groups reading Right Fragility, a lot of people continued in other groups and read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi, read My Grandmother's Hands, as I mentioned. I think some people also read James Baldwin. And we also started a practice of doing one Dvar Torah a month. That was what we called an anti-racist Dvar Torah. And that was really, I think, has been a very powerful practice. I know it has been for me, of seeing Torah, learning Torah more deeply, of weaving our commitments, our external political commitments, our external ideological commitments into the very fabric of our spiritual religious observance, and of our Shabbatot, because after all, that's one of the core things that we are as a minyan. And so not making it separate, but really part of how we do Jewish together, and how we wrestle with Torah together. And so many different people have brought us insights into Torah, and also used Divrei Torah as a way to deepen our anti-racist understanding. One more thing that has happened, and many of us participated in it more recently, was the development of the hospitality guide. And if you haven't seen that, I can share the link to that, I think, in a moment. And that is a way for us to acknowledge that sometimes we don't know what to say when somebody walks into our space, when we see people that we know or don't know. And some of where that came from was also a very powerful moment in the Minyan's Zoom Shabbatot, when when some quotes were shared by Jews of color who were members, or who are members of the Minyan, about experiences of microaggressions, experiences of feeling othered, of being grilled in some way, as Jews of color in our community. And so a piece of where that has led is to this idea of becoming more conscious. And I want to acknowledge that this work has not always been smooth, and it isn't supposed to be smooth. It has led to some contentious, uncomfortable, not always gracefully or elegantly conflict in person, and sometimes, especially because of the way we are now, on the listserv. And at its best, I invite us to see that as us taking steps, learning how to do this, how to talk to one another in ways that help each other grow around our deep understandings, and around holding each other and ourselves accountable in ways that are welcoming and not off-putting. And I want to say that sometimes we've made mistakes, and as I have, and some of those have led to really authentic, good conversations and relationship building. One of the things that's exciting is that there are also a lot of ideas that are still out there that we haven't yet brought into being, and that as we know, the boundaries between Dorshei Derekh and Germantown Jewish Centre and the TAC, the Tikkun Olam coordinating team, are fluid. And so a lot of members of the synagogue participated in the TAC conversations about racism in the last few weeks or months. Some people participated in the Tashlich, focused on anti-racism. And over the next month or so, month and a half, 2 months, there will be more opportunity for deep learning and relationship building for some of us, importantly, starting with a large group of leadership to continue on the insights that came through the report from the consultants, Calico Hill, when they left, and then are being continued now through a new consultancy called Eclipse. And if you want to know more about that, you can ask me or David Mosenkis. And just want to recognize that a lot of the synagogue decisions to take more leadership on this issue, we can see as connected in some larger way with this work. I remember back before the renaming of the TAC, when it wasn't yet, Germantown Jewish Centre wasn't yet ready to have a Black Lives Matter sign. And then when we all stood together, many of us more recently, when the Black Lives Matter sign was defaced and then a new one was installed. So we can see change, and we can also think about the changes that we want to see. And just want to leave us with a few thoughts about that. So first of all, let's see, did anybody manage to do this? Answer, Garden?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen just so you can see it. Here's a little bit of your thoughts on what has impacted you. Nice. And now I'd like to ask one more question.
It was too short to read it.
Oh, it was too short? Okay, sorry. I'll share it again and I can read it. I'm sorry about this little ad at the bottom. It says, are we welcoming, leadership, forgiving and fixing, bravery, anti-racist Torah, welcoming guide, hypersensitivity, paying staff fairly, privilege, reactions, people of color. There's only like 20 characters that you're allowed to put in. So thank you. And I'm gonna send you one more right now, if I'm allowed to still take another second of time. And this is, what do we want to see now? So what's a future impact for Germantown Jewish Centre, Dorshei Derekh, anti-racism that you want to see? Because I don't believe that we are done. And just as you're doing that, there was one other thing I was going to share. This comes from the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable. And a lot of what I'm talking about here is in this core racial justice framework, phase 1. Learning and internal commitment. A lot of what everybody else here today talked about was already in somewhat in phase 3 about changing communities and the world together. And part of what I have found so powerful about doing the work with so many of you is the ways that it's also led to transformative relationships and accountability. And what is powerful about this model is it's really a cycle. just like what we need to grow the tree of justice or the Eitz Chaim. And any time that there is challenge at any phase, we come back to the learning and internal commitment, continuing to read, continuing to educate ourselves so that we can continue to enter the work of the relationships, the accountability, and changing the world and our communities together. So let's just see if we've got some answers about what's next. I'm not going to hold you exactly to it, but I welcome, and we all do welcome anybody who wants to help make these things happen. So what do we want to see? Sharing experiences, empowering Jews of color, clergy of color, a more diverse Dorshei Derekh, keeping at it, understanding more members of color, many more JOCs. Look how many people wrote that. And that's really what I was thinking about too. In some ways, I think, especially because of the pandemic, it's been hard to get to that place, but not only. And if we look around our boxes, we know that a lot has changed, perhaps in our hearts and our heads, and there's still a lot more to change in terms of thinking about who we are, not just what we do and how we act. And I look forward to trying to make that possible together. Thank you to the Presser Committee for including us in this.
Thank you so much. I know we debated about the length of this because some people get pretty fidgety after an hour of Zoom, and we do have another half hour. So I encourage everybody to do your own personal standing up, stretching, fidgeting, whatever you need to do. But in a moment, we're going to turn it over to Mark Pinsky, our Zusher, and also member of our committee, to share questions. And we're going to have about 10 minutes in breakout rooms. The questions are, for those of you that are members of Dorshei Derekh or have been to programs, did our programs move you to action and engagement? And you might want to share how that, specifics about that. And there is a question about where our committee is going forward, how we're moving forward. We don't at present have a chair or a next scheduled event. So what would you see as a purpose of the Presser Shabbat, it should be Shabbatot, moving forward, given members' engagement in so many Tikkun Olam activities? You can see that picking out a topic for this group of people who are so exceedingly engaged is pretty intimidating. So, Mark.
Great. So I posted a couple things. I posted the questions. I also posted a one-page document that lists all of the Presser programs we could remember over the years. And I am now going to just go ahead and open the room for about 10 minutes.
Can you get out of there so we can see?
Yeah, let me.
Does that put us in the room? We need to join it.
You came in just as we were opening the rooms. Can I move you to a room?
Yes, we had a problem.
We went off and then we came back on.
Got it. Here we go.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Just good to see you. We're probably gonna have to sign off now.
All right. Well, it's nice to see you.
So good to see you. And this was really nice.
It's been really great. It went longer than we thought it was going to go, but we knew it would. But I could have, each of these topics could have been an hour, right? And
well, that's the point. Is it's Presser Shabbat, right?
Right. But it just really reinforced. We were all thinking like, is this real? We as a committee, we've been sort of wrestling with, should we really keep doing this? It's just sort of, there's so many other ways for people to express their action, their activist, whatever, right? And to learn. And boy, it sure feels like it listening to everybody, like we got to keep doing this. So.
I think so. I think so. I mean, yeah, I can't think of like necessarily a place where I've gone moved towards action.
Yeah.
But I don't even think that's necessarily like it's just so important to have these topics raised up and
Right.
in this context, because it's what makes being Jewish feel meaningful and relevant.
Well, and I would say not just raised up, but opened up, right? Because for people like you and people like me who think of, activism of some sort, it's just part of what we do, and your family does, and our family does, but not everybody does. And it's sort of amazing to me as someone who's been here for now 6 years, 5.5 years, like to think that this wasn't always what Dorshei was. It's just
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Is this 15 years? Is that what this
I think
is?
it's 15 years of the Presser. Yeah, I know. Anyway, I don't want to hold you up. I should let you go. And
No, it's fine. What I was thinking was like, we also need a Michael Mash weekend, and
We do.
you know what I mean?
Well, we actually have been talking about whether we can somehow combine Stefan Presser and Michael Mash and make it, in memory of, but we haven't gotten that far yet. And, and then tonight, so many of the Presser family are here and their kids and nephews.
That is amazing to me.
That's
amazing. Yeah. Anywho, I just
All
want
right.
to say I was in another context.
Yeah.
Where we were talking about, I don't know if you know the stuff that we do called reevaluation counseling. Have we told you?
Oh,
about
I know
that?
about reevaluation. Yeah, Clara does that, so I know about it.
your
We
daughter?
have many friends who do. Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
So I've been very involved in it for the last 30 years or so.
Yeah.
And last weekend we had like a couple hour long gathering. The topic was climate change and the economy, which is kind of a funny topic for like a group that's about like, personal growth or whatever.
Right.
But actually it was like, the sort of idea was like, we can think about the economy, like regular people can think about the economy.
Exactly.
And it was very amazing. And a lot of what this woman talked about was, public banking and,
Cool.
things that are happening. Anyway, it was a whole thing. Anyway,
That's great.
you're never far from my mind. is my
Oh,
point.
I wish I, yeah, that's great. That's great. Well,
Yeah.
that's how we live.
Exactly.
Say
All
hi
right.
to Nathan behind you.
I will. Nathan,
Shavua tov.
Shavua Tov. All right. This is wonderful.
See you soon.
I'll
I
send
hope.
Betsy an email. Yeah, hope so. Bye.
Bye.
is being recorded.
I think it sounded further away than that.
If everyone could mute themselves again, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay.
What?
So we left our keys in the door.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Alright.
And we have about 10 minutes left, and Deborah Cohen needs about 5 minutes and Michael needs about 5 minutes. So let's spend about 5 minutes just sharing ideas or sharing things that happened in your group that you would like to share with a larger group, partly because we want to give the Muskie root some fodder for thinking through what's going to happen with the Stefan Presser Social Justice Shabbat, since we don't have a chair at the moment. So I guess just unmute yourself, and if I don't think I need to call on people, I think you can just speak.
And I want to offer just one quick observation that the majority of the Presser Shabbatot over the years have been on issues in society: immigration, gun violence, returning citizens, and so on. A few have been on internal issues, or basically internal issues, like the transgender Jews and anti-racism in the sense of in the synagogue and the Minyan. I think those are both important issues, sets of issues. We need to think about what's the balance between them. Stefan's career was certainly involved, especially with the wider world. And so I don't want to lose that focus, even as we find places for other issues.
I don't remember Dorshei Derekh being at a loss for words. But anybody that wants, there's something in the chat. Are those the questions? Okay, Deborah says she's donating 3 minutes to the conversation, but I don't think we need it, Deborah. I'm just going to take from the fact that nobody's speaking up that this isn't the right forum for doing that, and we can proceed in. We'll talk with the Muskie root about what our next steps are going forward. So I'm going to turn it over to one of our newer committee members, Deborah Cohen.
Thank you. So before we end this meeting, we need to thank the committee members and the past chairs of the Presser Committee. So our Torah portion for this coming Shabbat is Truma, and that translates usually as contribution. But Samson Raphael Hirsch, the commentator, says that it actually means uplift. So I would like to thank the chairs and the very involved members of the Presser Committee for their tireless work lifting up social justice issues, which were a wonderful tribute to the memory of Stefan Presser. So in true Dorshei Derekh minhag or tradition, let's go like this. As Betsy demonstrated before, as I read off the names. David Mosenkis, Donald Joseph, Betsy Teutsch, and Malka Bina Klein, who is our most recent chair. I would also like to give a special thanks to Betsy. Betsy will not call herself the chair, but she kind of was the chair for this event tonight. And Betsy just had crystal clear vision of what this event was going to be, and just really synthesize concepts really beautifully to make it happen. I'd also like to thank the other current members, Michael Blackman, Atenea Rosado, Mark Pinsky, who is serving as our Zusher, as well as Donald Joseph. And I would like to note that Don is going to be celebrating a very special birthday, which next Shabbat, a week from today, which is actually not a prime number, but is a very special number nonetheless. And we just thank you, Don, for your many years of service to Dorshei Derekh and to the Presser committee, and just everything you bring. And we are very grateful, and we wish you many more years of good health and good trouble, as they say. And we're going to conclude our tonight's program with Michael Blackman reading a beautiful prayer.
Hello, everyone. I guess for me, life is how you look at it. And one of the things about everyday life and COVID is I try to look at some of the rewards rather than just about, oh, well, when will this be over? And one of the rewards is I came across this prayer from a new friend, Rabbi Rachel Grant Meyer, who lives up in Brooklyn. And this prayer was originally written by Rabbi Joshua Zolkar, Rabbi Erica Steelman, and Dr. Gloria Becker, and Rabbi Rachel Grant Meyer adapted it. And that's what I'm going to share with you folks. Mechor HaChaim, source of life. You have blessed each of us with your spirit. In your wisdom, you have made each of us a unique treasure. Ma'ayin Chayenu, wellspring of our lives. Cause us to flow with courage, strength, and compassion, to live our stories openly, proudly, and joyfully. Shechiana Shel Avava, presence of love. You embrace us with your love. May we embrace ourselves, our partners, our lovers, our friends, our children, our dear ones, with the power of your Avaha Rabbah, your unending, boundless love. Ra'uch HaShalom, spirit of peace and wholeness. Open our eyes to the gifts and blessings we offer and receive from each other. Open our hearts to welcome each other fully and truly. Open our hands to embrace, to support, to lift each other's Begela, Briano, Bishalom, Uvret, with joy, with song, with peace, and with deep friendship. Let us walk together with strength, compassion, and love. We bless you, wellspring of our lives, who lovingly fills us with holiness and joy. Amen.
Well, people gathering from near and far, it's been wonderful to be together. We didn't get too much chance to get into ideas about moving forward, but we have a Minyan meeting coming up, and we'll ask that this be put on the Minyan meeting agenda, and maybe some of the ideas that were shared in small group will be shared with the whole group. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to our speakers. Thanks to the Sherman Presser family for joining us with their friends tonight. And thank you, Mark, for being our Zusher. And Shavua Tov. Thank you, Rabbi Zeph, for leading us as well. Bye.